Yeah, we talked last night about some directing stuff and some style stuff, and it was a lot of fun. So thanks for having me. Thanks for being here this morning. Um, a quick little backstory about me is I come from Bethel. I worked at Bethel for over 10 years, doing multiple positions, and now I own my own company, and we do concert films and event designs and that kind of stuff all over the place. But one of the things that we do a lot of, and the thing that I get asked to talk about the most, is cinema broadcast, which is basically taking our normal live stream broadcast and making it more cinematic and less traditional. I have a example clip that I was going to show you guys up there of just like what that means exactly. It's from a shoot that we did for Carrie Job, and there's a lot of cameras, but it's a great understanding when I start talking about cameras and camera positions and how to use the cameras, seeing the example of how we shoot and kind of the style that we're going for, hopefully helps you guys. So we'll start with that, and then we'll start getting into actual camera stuff. Can you guys see that? Okay. Actually, I think it's almost over. Yeah, I stop it here anyways. So, as you could probably see, there is a lot of cameras in that shoot. We had 10 cameras in that shoot, but the base cameras that were in that shoot, you guys have here, and that's kind of what I wanted to kind of go over with you guys. So We had 10 cameras there. You guys have 5 cameras technically with the slider in the back. And your main 2 cameras, your camera 1 and your camera 2 that are back there, those would be considered your follow cam shots, which in that clip, if you notice, we had the 2 follow cam shots too. There was always the tight, and there was always from the front, and then we had a 45-ish, or a slash cam as we call it, shooting her from a different angle. So we always had the 2 on her. The other camera that you probably saw, we had 3 of them. You guys have 1 of them, is a wide in the back of the room. If you notice, there was a lot of shots from the back of the room, showing the stage, showing the audience, that kind of thing. We had 3, but again, we were in a 28,000 seat room, and this is 700, 800? 300. Even more so, like, you wouldn't need 10 cameras. Like, in a room this size, there's a lot, like, I get asked to put cameras in different rooms, and they're like, we want 10 cameras. I'm like, I don't even know where I would put 10 cameras in a room that size. So, and then we had 2 cameras on stage that were handheld, and you guys also have your 2 wireless handheld cameras that can go everywhere. So the bass in that shoot was still basically the fundamental bass that you guys have here right now. So you can still achieve a lot with the 5 cameras, 4 operated, that you guys have here. So I quickly was going to show you, we don't have to watch the full clip, but this is now an example from another shoot that we did with 4 cameras, just so that way you guys can see, like, there's like the big concert bass level. This is a smaller, it's on Corey Asbury's roof, actually. This is his house, and we shot it on his roof, but we only did it with 4 cameras, and this was live as well. What I'm going to show you is actually live. So just so you guys can see the difference between 10 and 4, but what you can still achieve with 4 cameras. So we'll watch a tiny bit of this.
And I've scaled all the highest of mountains, and I've stood at the edge of their peaks, but I still couldn't see to the edge of your love for me. And I've walked on the wildest of waters, and I've sunk to the depths of the sea, but I still couldn't fathom the depths of your love for me. Come on, sing this with me. Canyons wide, and canyons wide, and the oceans deep can't contain all your love for me. No matter how high or far I reach, there's no end to your love for me. Yeah, I've wrestled, and I wrestled beneath in the valley, and I barely hung on through the night. But just when I thought it was darkest, the sun began to rise. Come on, canyons wide, and canyons wide, and the oceans deep can't contain all your love for me. No matter how high or far I reach, there's no end to your love for me. You better talk to me, Brother Regan Cruz. Hey! Feels good.
So I'll leave this playing. This is like a 7-minute song, so we don't have to watch the whole the whole thing. But I don't know if you guys noticed, even though there was 4 cameras, there was still kind of the same main principle where we had 1 camera that was always tight on Corey. We always had Camera 2 technically was like the wider shot of Corey, and he was also getting keys. We had drums and guitar, so we had 2 other handhelds on the stage, because it wasn't actually a stage, but shooting drums and guitar. So the main fundamentals were still there, and some of those cameras just had to share some other responsibilities because of what was happening in the room, and because of the lack of cameras. So, here's the multi-view, which I guess I'll just play that in the background. You guys can kind of see it as I talk. You can see that we had the 4 cameras, and we did have a drone technically pumped into the system. It was a test. It honestly did not work that well. So we hardly actually used that drone shot, but that would be that 5th camera is the drone. That would be our wide shot of the roof. But if you don't have really expensive drones, it doesn't look that awesome for a broadcast. So that's why we didn't use it. So going through your guys' cameras, camera 1 in your back, that it's your follow cam. It is your whoever's speaking on the stage, whoever's leading the song on the stage. That is your main shot. And as boring as that shot could feel, it is actually one of the most important shots in the whole live stream. The whole point of what we're doing here with these cameras is we're trying to tell a story for what's happening in the room, and we're trying to tell that story to the people that are watching online or watching it later. And one of the main things, if you were in the room, one of the main focal points is going to be whoever's speaking or whoever's singing up here. And that's why that shot, as boring as it may feel, it's actually really important in telling the story, so that way the people online can feel engaged with what's happening on the stage. Your camera 2, it's as important. All cameras are as important, but your camera 2 is going to be the second angle of what's happening on the stage. So like for speaking, it would be your wider shot, and your camera 1 would be your tighter shot for speaking. For anything that's worship, it would either be a secondary shot of whoever's leading, or because again you only have 4 cameras, it is another camera to be able to catch other things happening in the room, whether that's a second vocalist getting ready for a next part of the song, a next song in general, or finding other instruments, drums or guitars or bass or anything else that you can find, even audience stuff. And I have a couple examples that I could show you of going from like audience to the stage and that kind of thing. So there's a lot that camera 2 can do. Your cameras 3 and 4, which are going to be your stage cameras, their main focus is going to be what's happening on the stage, because that's where they are. So if you're on this side, clearly you're going to be getting drums, and anything else that's on this side of the stage. The focus for, is this 3 over here, or which one's 3? Just so I know. Okay, cool.
They go wherever they want.
Got it. Yeah. So if you're on this side of the stage, your main focus is obviously going to be keys, because that's going to be one of the bigger functions of the worship set is keys. Now you're going to have guitars and other things that you need to capture as well, but because you're on the stage or in this general vicinity, those are going to be the main focuses that you want to get. One of the things that I would challenge any operator that is running a camera on stage is turning around and finding some crowd shots, or finding any of those reaction shots from the crowd. Even when I've run stage camera in a smaller room like this, I would actually like walk off the stage and come out. You can even come out to here and getting foreground of crowd. It's again helping tell the story online like you were here in the room. So I want to see what it's looking like if I'm standing over here in the crowd and you see the crowd, seeing the reactions, seeing people worshiping, seeing people praying, those types of things can really help tell the story of what's actually happening in the room. And then your camera 5 it's a robotic camera at this point, and so it's going to do what it's going to do, but the idea is it's the cutaway, it's the safety, and it can also just show the big overview shot of what's happening in the room, which is actually I feel like it's necessary in also telling the story, because sometimes you want to just see the big overview shot of what's happening in the room. Now that you have camera 5, and Mike and I were talking about this, it makes it easier on camera 1 to not have to always get wide shots, and they can focus more on what's on the stage and let camera 5 actually capture the wide. It makes camera 1's life a little bit easier in that sense.
Watching the 2 videos that you had, I'm just amazed by the amount of movement.
Sure.
And just the shot, and in one shot is like here, and then there's the movement that goes with it.
Yep.
Obviously with camera 1 and 2, we're not going to get that type of movement, but when camera 1 and 2 are doing this, are you still looking for some type of movement like that? Are we trying to make everything movement?
Yeah. And I have some examples I'll show you guys of like what camera 1 and 2 could look like on sticks. Some very specific examples. So one of the things with the movement that you're talking about that I try to teach all camera operators that I work with this trick, and it's kind of a big part of this cinema style, is I will tell the operators, you need to attempt to be live or be able to be usable 100% of the time, which is that's not actually physically possible, but it's the goal to go for. And what I mean by that is, if you're watching some of these cameras, especially like camera 3 and camera 2, their movements going between one shot and the next could be taken live, if that makes sense. So they're going to be transitioning their shots, and I'll show you some clear examples from one subject to the other. But instead of having the camera and you're shooting drums, having the camera, you put the camera down, you walk over here, you get another shot, here's our shot of drums, and we're going to move to guitar, so we're just going to move it like this over to guitar and change our focus. That keeps that transition from one subject to the next fully usable if the director wants it, if the director needs it. It's just something that we tell all of our operators to attempt to do. And that is where this movement comes in. Once you start getting the hang of actually keeping your transitions from one subject to the other usable, that's where you see a lot of these cameras, especially in this one, where they're walking around the stage, but they're making all of their movements fully usable. So they're coming from guitar or bass to drums, and they're just moving and walking this way and making that whole movement fully usable for the director. When you're running cameras on sticks, you can still make your movements usable and make your transitions usable. It's a little less movement than you're going to get with a handheld, clearly, because it's on sticks and not handheld. Okay, this is a great example here. I was running this camera. The top is, I was wearing a GoPro, so you can see the camera, and the bottom is actually what I was shooting. And I'm on stage, and I go from drums to keys to guitar, back to drums. And the hard part is that they were on 3 different riser heights, so it was about this high difference between the 3 risers. And so I wasn't as smooth as I would have liked to be because I was jumping down the risers. But you can at least see how I'm holding the camera and going between the 3 subjects as smooth as I could. So what you might have noticed was, even though like when I was going down to the guitar, I was jumping down the riser to get to the guitar player, even though it wasn't super smooth, I was as fast as I could be. And part of that is when I'm running any handheld camera that's on stage or especially on stage, but even in the audience, my goal as the stage camera operator is I want the director to be able to take my camera every other shot. So if I'm on drums, he takes a vocal shot, I have a guitar shot. So he can go from drums to vocal to guitar, back to vocal or wide, and then now I'm on bass or keys or whatever it is. So I'm physically moving enough to where the director's not just cutting back and forth between drums and vocals. He can cut between whatever's happening from those cameras back to me on stage. So giving that variety of shots. So my transitions weren't as smooth as I could have been, but I was getting to the next, subject extremely fast. And that's one of the things that I always push my operators, especially handheld operators, to find the next subject and get there as quick as possible. A trick that I do a lot is, and you'll kind of get more comfortable with this as you do this more, but if I am focusing here on, this is our keys player, and I know I have a good shot, I might take a look up around to see what's happening outside of what's in my monitor. It's really easy to get stuck into what is in your monitor right here. And you can use your peripheral vision or just quickly take a glance at, oh, I see he's going to do something. And that way you can easily transition your shot from here and just pull your focus over to the next shot. And even just think like this is something that I'll do for a director. So if I'm up here and I'm shooting the drums and I could come from the drums, I could go to, I'm assuming this is bass over here, I can come to bass. But if there's ever a time where either I physically need a break, or the moment is very down and chill, drums aren't playing, bass isn't playing, it's just vocals and just, let's just say it's just vocals and the crowd singing. I will do something like this where I'll come down like this, get as wide as I physically can, and just hold it there. So now I'm still offering a shot to the director, and it's showing the main vocal that we have here on 1/3 of the frame, and then over here on the other third of the frame, we're showing the audience and what they're physically doing. So it's finding a shot that we can still offer the director, even though I'm not really doing much, I'm just chilling right here. I would come down on my knee because I would want to be the least distracting as possible. So I would kind of, let's get back here, find a shot. Now we have an even better shot because we have a wider view of the room, but we're offering something to the director even though we're not doing anything at the moment. It's offering the director as many shots as you physically can. Even if you feel like there's nothing for you to shoot, there's always something to shoot. And in that case, it might be cool to have one operator, have your wide reverse establishing shot, and then your other handheld operator walk into the crowd and get some sort of other crowd reaction shot in this magical only vocals and crowd singing. But I'm just, creating a scenario for you guys to see. I think my next one, okay. This is an example now of it was one of our follow cams. We had 2 follow cams, just kind of like what you guys have. And this is an example of the camera going from one shot to the other and also keeping that transition usable. It will take practice, especially with the DSLR lenses and the rigs that you guys have. This movement will take practice, but it is doable. So I'll show you the example and then we can talk about it here. So that was it. It's super simple. He was focused on the electric player that was behind the lead vocal, getting that guitar part that you could hear, and then he racked his focus, which is, he didn't even have to zoom. He literally just changed his focus, which is even easier, from the subject behind now to the subject in front, and just did a nice pull focus and pan up to their face. So that transition between those two subjects is fully usable live. And that shot was taken live. So that camera operator's hearing what's happening on stage, which was the little guitar line, and then knowing that the vocals are going to come in, so he's going to then pull focus and move up to the vocals there. That vocal is also playing electric, so they both had electric lines. So it's just hearing what's happening musically, but then also just making that transition between the two subjects as usable as possible.
Play that one more time.
Yeah, of course.
So that's not one camera, you're saying. Is that one camera?
So this shot of Phil is one camera,
The transition from the
but so this is one camera, and then it cuts to this camera, and then he's transitioning to Brandon there, and then we cut to the next camera. Yeah. So yeah, in that case, it would be like this camera was on your main vocal, that camera was getting electric, and then to your next vocal, basically. So the director was still cutting between two cameras, but the operator was able to make the transition. So this is another, this is like a 45 camera, but another example of a camera on sticks making a transition usable. This one I see all the time, and it always makes me laugh, where you can see that her name's Brooke. She's in focus right here. This is like, she's the main singer. We're focused on her. And you can kind of see off in this frame right here, this is one of the other leaders who was playing guitar at the time, and he's out of focus. And they walk in such a way, you'll see in the example, to where the guitar player actually kind of steps into the frame too much. And the operator just pulled his focus to the guitar player. So instead of trying to keep your focus on the person who's now blocked, he made the whole shot fully usable still, because he was just able to, it's as simple as pulling your focus. You don't even have to zoom. It's just a simple focus pull, and now the next subject is in focus, and it actually looks intentional. So I'll show you that clip here. And then as the guitar player backed up, he stayed on that guitar player, which made the shot more intentional, like it was planned. Instead of, the guitar player walked in the shot, he walked out of the shot, that can look like not as intentional or pleasing, versus if something gets in front of you, just change your focus, pick them up, and then maybe, depending on how quickly or not quickly they're in your frame, just follow them out of the shot, and now that whole shot looks intentional. I think I have another. Okay, so this is another example, same shoot, 45 camera on the other side now of her, and let's go ahead. So that one, he basically did a little pop zoom, but the idea is that technically he was changing from, he was live on her. So let's watch it again. So he's live right now, okay, to another camera, and then he changed his shot, if that makes sense. So he was live on, I don't even remember what camera that was, but he was live. The director went to the next camera, so now he's getting a new shot to offer to the director. But that new shot, he wanted to get a tight of the hand and then pull it down to her face. But the whole sequence was fully usable. The director could have stayed live on that shot the whole time. So watch it again. He zooms in, gets her hand in focus, pans down to her face. So that whole sequence was fully usable, even though he was technically transitioning between two shots there. Let's watch another example here. So a little bit different because there wasn't actually, no one like walked in front of him or anything. He was just finding who is actually singing, which in this case is Peter across the other side of the stage. But he had a shot of Brooke who was singing BGVs. And just panned over, changed his focus, and now he's on the main vocal for the song. And so that, again, that transition between one shot and the next shot, fully usable.
So in that shot,
Yeah.
it's probably on the main singer,
Mm-hmm.
and then the director said probably go somewhere else, and he, instead of trying to make a huge movement, he just slid down. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it was either the
That
director's...
wasn't his. The whole intention wasn't that the director didn't say, "Oh, get all three."
Nope.
He was on one, and then he was transitioning
Yep.
to that next. Where am I going to go? And he kind of just slid instead of
Yeah.
making a big
movement, yeah. And so that's also understanding your camera. And the more that you operate the camera, the more that you're going to get comfortable with doing these types of movements. But these movements, they're not changing their, except for the last one where we zoomed in, like the other two, they're not changing their zoom. They're not changing their framing. They're just moving the camera, changing their focus to capture the next subject that's in focus. And it's very simple but subtle and effective movement that looks intentional. So this one, like you were saying, it was either the director saying get a different shot, or he was live on him, cut away from him, and now the operator's just like, where's the next shot? Here's the next shot. These are things also, like with this shoot, we did multiple rehearsals with the operator. So that's another thing. Rehearsals are a great time to find those shots. So the operators had a chance to be on their camera during rehearsals, see where everyone was, and figure out, oh, okay, I should be able to pull focus from this vocal to this vocal. Or I think in the next clip I'm showing you guitar and vocals, so that way you can see another example. Same camera, but yep, it goes from the lead vocal to the guitar player. This one is a little bit faster of a transition. Still could be used live, in my opinion, but it was the example of hearing the guitar and just getting to it. So that one, he didn't change his zoom. He just quickly moved over to the next subject and got it in focus because he heard the guitar line. I think I was directing this, and I think I remember specifically saying, Cam 2, get me guitar. Because my other stage camera operator was with the keys, and the other one was with the drums, so I didn't have the guitar shot. And so it was a, give me guitar. Even though that was a not as... technically, we would call that like a whip transition, where he's like, it's a whip pan, where he's quickly panning, rather than these other ones where, I guess they're just following the subjects anyways. Like this one, he's panning, but he's very smooth and just nails the shot there. This one would be considered a whip pan because he's quickly moving from one subject to the next, if that makes sense. It takes time with actually operating the camera and getting used to like making those transitions usable, or making your walks or your movements, everything as usable as you can. And then also it just takes practice on the director side of seeing when the shot is ready. We talked about that last night of like, when would you actually take a shot? There's times on some of these broadcasts where the energy is extremely high. On that first Carrie Job clip, the energy was building up, and there was a drum shot that wasn't, he was definitely moving and the framing was a little crazy. That was more intentional on my part because I used that to help drive the energy because it was a little crazy. He technically was still in frame, it just wasn't as stable. Or like he was in focus and he was in frame, but it wasn't as stable as it could be. Sometimes you can do that to actually add energy into the movement, but you definitely want it to be framed. The other thing with a handheld camera, because I'm talking about handheld a lot because it's kind of the main movement piece. Obviously, the other two cameras can move, but it's okay to walk with the camera and keep it framed. So you can easily, if your drums are here and your guitar is here, you'll notice a lot of times we'll come from the drums and then we'll slowly walk out to the guitar and focus onto the guitar. So instead of this type of movement where it's drums, guitar, it's thinking about keeping it as stable as possible and just moving to the guitar and changing your focus. So now technically that's a usable shot. You could do it as slow as that depending on the energy, or you could quickly do that type of movement as well, depending on how fast the song is actually moving. And some of that can come from the directors too. If you're camera 3 and you're on the drums, the director knows that the guitar part is the guitar next to you. He could call cam 3, get the guitar, and knowing that you can make the transition from here to here and keep it live. A lot of the movement that you'll see in like the Kerry Jobe one, the Corey Asbury one, a lot of that movement was the cameras doing that exact thing. They're walking around between frames, going from one frame to the next frame. So it's linking all of your shots together. And as you even saw in that example right there, I wasn't even changing my zoom. I was literally just changing my focus from one subject to the next. Once you get used to the lens and how it operates, your brain will kind of get into the rhythm of from here to here is this much focus twist. And you kind of start, it's like muscle memory. And the more you use the same lens, the more that you'll get used to that. The lenses that I use all the time when I'm operating cameras, I get very muscle memory with it. So I know from here to here is this much focus pull. From here to here is this much focus pull. I keep messing up this one because it's backwards from my lens. Yeah. Well, Canon and Sigma are backwards too. So it's like every time, every lens is different. But yeah, that's making the movements usable. And we can walk through this in more detail too. But when I'm operating a handheld camera, I tend to keep my elbows, if I can, towards my side. And a lot of my movement is in my legs and my hips. If I'm going to physically walk, that's where I would bring my elbows out slightly so that way your arms can absorb a little bit of that wobble. But usually if I'm standing there getting a shot, I try to tuck my elbows into my side. And if you want to, even the battery into your chest, and it just helps keep things a little stable. And then all your movement is now on your legs and your hips. From that, let's go into talking about movement that's let's say we're going from a build, so a big part of the song, it could drop into a chorus, so it's like this big energetic part of the song, and then the song dies out, and it just like kind of chills out, goes down to maybe, keys and acoustic. Your movements, you're going to want to have bigger, faster, more energetic movements for that big build, the big chorus bridge. And then as the song dies down, your movements will want to slow down and be more steady. So when it comes to a handheld camera, Let's take keys for example here. So if we're shooting keys, and maybe it's, we're getting shots of the vocals, and then we're coming to keys, that's a really tight shot, but I know some people that can nail this. I couldn't do it first try, but these types of shots, and you're getting a lot of movement even doing this type of thing around the keys, and then the song dies out, you're going to want to take those movements, the big movements that you're doing, and then settle it with the song. So that would be, for example, if we're doing a lot more of this type of movement, I'm just making it a crazy example. I wouldn't do this movement live, and then the song dies out, I'm going to keep the camera locked to me, but now my movement's going to be very, very slow in my legs, and I'm going to try to keep it as steady as I physically can with adding just a tiny bit of movement in my legs. And that, even this type of shot here, where it's like, okay, now I'm going to be on the keys, slowly rack to the vocals, and then slowly rack back to the keys. So now I'm offering more shots, but I'm being as stable as I can, as smooth as I can to match the energy of what's happening in the room. So finding ways to keep it as steady, but add a tiny bit of movement, and usually I recommend doing that in your legs. That way it's not just, the idea is if everything is just static and still and not moving, it can be a little bit jarring, especially in the slow moments. If it's just like static to static to static, and that's where offering just a tiny bit of movement in there can help it feel not so jarring.
From the director side,
Mm-hmm.
if you were standing there and just using it as an example, if you were going from the guitar to the drums,
Mm-hmm.
is the director, if he knows you can do it, say, hey, I want you to go from guitar to drums, or camera to transition from guitar to drums? Or is that something that they're going to be on there and you're just going to kind of see what they do? I don't know.
It's definitely something that you can call for, and if I called for it, it would be something like,
You have to know
like to get guitar, and like as simple as like as fast as possible. And now that's why we're kind of talking with you guys today, and we talked with you guys last night, was if we're learning as camera ops to make those transitions usable. So if I'm going to go from, if I'm literally standing right here getting this and you tell me cam 3 get drums, like that's going to be my shot. And it's just learning and practicing those different shots and making that usable. So that way all you have to say as a director is 3 get drums, and not have to. The goal with the director is to obviously say as least words as possible. So I wouldn't want to be like 3, give me a transition, it would just be get drums, and then knowing like, okay, we're training the operators and we're learning how to make that next shot as usable as possible. And it's just also kind of looking at the stage and figuring out I'm assuming the stage plot kind of changes from week to week. Yeah. And so it's just like, that's one of those things during rehearsals, is just kind of blocking out like, okay, I know that a guitar is here and the drums are there. And so making a shot from the guitars to the drums is going to be easy. And then the next weekend, there could be no guitar player there. So now okay, I can't really call for guitar from this camera because there ain't no guitar here, and getting it all the way across the room might not be possible with what's happening on stage. And so it's just knowing what the stage is, and that's where the rehearsal time in the morning is, I think, super valuable to be able to make those types of shots happen. For the operator, so you can kind of map it out yourself, and then 2, for the director to know what is physically possible. One of the best camera operators that I know, we do this conference that's 2 weeks long every summer, and they're really long days, so we don't require the operators to be there for rehearsals, because Otherwise, it'd be a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. day for 2 weeks long. So we just don't require them to be there for the rehearsals. But even though it wasn't required, he would come every morning for rehearsals. He would grab his coffee. He'd come sit in the seats and just watch rehearsals. And he was, even though he didn't have his camera and he wasn't blocking out stuff, he was used to his camera. He didn't necessarily need to practice with it, but he would sit there during rehearsals, watch the set, listen to the leaders talk through the set and what's going to happen. So now he's blocking out his own shots in his head, knowing like, okay, during this song, there's a big guitar solo. During this song, nothing's happening on stage. It's going to be just vocals and acoustic. So he's listening and watching himself. And he is one of the best handheld camera ops that I know. And it's just those little things that set him obviously above the rest, because he didn't have to be there at 6 a.m, but he chose to because he wanted his camera to be that good. So that's just an example of why rehearsals are important. The next thing that I kind of wanted to mention was, we've talked a lot about movement. We've talked a lot about transitions and keeping them usable. One of the things when you have movement is now keeping that movement intentional. I see this all the time. It's really easy on cameras that are on sticks, and it can happen on stage cameras as well. So I'm over here on stage and I just want to be moving to add movement to the shot, and then I start just doing this. And this back and forth movement starts ending up, I call it boat sway. It just looks like you're just swaying back and forth because you're trying to add movement. But now this just, even if it's slow, just this back and forth movement can start just looking like boat sway. And then it starts feeling unintentional. It just feels like we're moving to move. And that's what we want to avoid. So when I'm doing movement, I'm going to use drums as an example. I like to use my focus and also pick positions to focus to that will make that movement more intentional. So that could be like, if the drummer's playing the hi-hat really slow, I slowly go to focus to the hi-hat, and then I might slowly focus up to his face, and then move it down to the snare or the toms or whatever he's playing, or this cymbal there that he's playing. So now I'm moving between what's actually happening in the drums. Or if we're a guitar player, it could be, there's a guitar right here. If there's a guitar player, it could be, from shooting down the fretboard, getting his fingers, to what he's playing here. Maybe we go up to his face to get his reaction, and then back down to what he's playing there. So now our movement is being more intentional, and we're not just here on this guitar player just doing this back and forth movement. We're actually finding what he's doing, getting a reaction shot. Maybe we come to his fingers right here, and then back down to what he's playing down there. So now our movement is more intentional.
You know what I mean? How do you feel about seeing camera operating in shots?
I think some of this comes down to the church's philosophy. Like, I've taught this same thing at a church, and they've tried camera ops on stage that are in view of everything, and then their leadership just said, we don't want to see camera ops. And so now they kind of just hide in the background, and it's a different style, but that's what the church leadership wanted, which is which is fine. Definitely wear black.
Flip side of that too, though, right?
Yeah.
So that shot that you were just doing is great, and I would do it all day long.
Yep.
But I feel like the minute I get close to Matt or Lacey leading,
Sure.
I become a distraction.
Yep.
To the rest of the people in the audience.
And so that shot specifically, I wouldn't get that close to the center unless that's a specific thing that we were doing. I would do that shot on a guitar player that's like off to the side here, if that makes sense. So me personally, I would say, yes, it's distracting if your vocal is here and I'm here. Like, that's really distracting. If you have a guitar player here, it's easy to come and get this shot, or even come down here and get this shot. Being off to the side but still on stage, in my opinion, is fine.
Yeah, I think it's not.
Right. I would definitely try to stay out of your camera 1 and 2's like framing, and not see them. And if you're gonna get something, I always tell opposites, if you're gonna get something, unless I specifically tell you otherwise, get in and get out as quick as possible. So if it's like you're gonna get a shot of the base, it's like come over here, grab a shot of the base, and then get out of there as quickly as possible. So it's like get in there, let the director take the shot, and then don't just stand there and linger back there. But if the church is, okay with it, I think what I've noticed a lot of times is the churches, the audience doesn't care as much as we think they do, which is kind of funny. And if you just create the norm, if there's ops on stage, then it just kind of becomes a normal and no one thinks about it, if that makes sense. So this is a shoot that we did at a conference, and we specifically, to go on the flip side of what you were saying, we specifically told the operators that we want you to get close to the vocals. And it was a big part of the style. So this is our follow cam shot. And you'll actually see the operator at one point. So there's the operator right next to him, and then now here is the shot. So on the flip side, that room was really big, and the stage was about as big or slightly bigger than this entire room. So in that case, it's a little bit different because there's so much room, and that one little subject is like not as noticeable. But in that case, we specifically told the operators, we want you to go out there and actually get close to the vocals. It was the style that we're going for that shoot, and it worked. So again, that was approved by leadership, and there was no problems because everyone was aware of what was happening. And we also didn't get any complaints about it during that conference. So it's a great point. I would say, yeah, definitely the guitar shot that I was showing there, I wouldn't walk out here and get a guitar player that close kind of thing. So, but yeah, go ahead.
How that movement could apply to camera 1 or 2? Obviously, they're not the same because it's not that movement, but...
Yeah, a lot of times the movement comes into, one, I tend to loosen up the drag, which I think you guys already do for worship. And so that way, one, our natural body shake and body movement kind of just translates into the camera. And then two, you can easily create, I know a lot of people talk about the figure eight thing, like pretending like you're doing a figure eight. I think that can look a little too robotic, but just adding a tiny bit of up, down, left, right into the camera. And as the song builds, you can add a little bit more. And then also finding other things, like if the guitar player's playing guitar, if you can get tight enough, get a shot of the guitar and just a nice pan up to their face. In this example here, there's a shot when I cut to camera 1 who's over here, and he has a tight of the acoustic right there, and then he just pans up to his face. Now, he was handheld, so that movement was a bit more of this because he's holding the camera. But the same thing applies if you're on sticks, is like finding something like that where it's just like their acoustic, you're having a little bit of movement, and then we can just slowly go up to their face. And now we're making a move that is intentional. So we showed what they're doing, we're showing what they're singing, and we're just making that movement intentional, if that makes sense. Having a tiny bit of movement in the head, I would also, this is something you guys could play with, is turning your stabilizer off. Because these stabilizers, they give you this jello effect to where when you're moving it, it kind of is snapping backwards. Yeah, if I'm going to be shooting this vocal here, it's just adding a tiny bit of movement into it. I'm messing with your drag too at the same time. To where we're adding a little bit of extra movement into the lens. And as it gets bigger, I mean, I'm not going to be going like this, but just that tiny bit of movement into it can help keep it feeling like we're moving along and it's not just a static locked off shot, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you can, from this position here, you can, transition from drums if you wanted to. I'm assuming there's a guitar player in front of them at times that you can pull focus to, and then back to the vocal here. And even like widening out into this frame here to capture if there's people's hands, you can pull focus to their hands, showing what's happening. Yeah. And then pull a focus up to the vocal. Again, you're showing what's happening in the room. So don't feel like you have to, especially on cam 2. I would recommend cam 1 stays tighter on the vocals, and then cam 2 is your camera that's going to be can go wide and then go tight and then find people's hands or find drums, guitar, vocal, whatever it is. Personally, like if you're looking to get better yourself, there's a lot of material. I could even send Mike a bunch of links that he could send to all you guys. There's a lot of material that I know I watch a lot of stuff. I know other people that I work with, they watch a lot of stuff. And that's one of those things that's like, if you want to get better at this, there's a lot of material out there that you can watch throughout the week. And it just, one, inspires, for me, when I'm watching other stuff, it inspires me of like, oh, I should try to get that shot. Or I want to attempt to do this, or whatever it is. As a director, if you're watching something, you're like, I like how that cut together. I like how he told that story. It can help inspire that throughout the week. So that's just something that I personally do. It's just like I consume as much material. Obviously, I work in this industry, so it's, for me, I would consider it part of my job. But like I consume as much material from different churches to different mainstream acts that are broadcasting, or any concert films that are like on Netflix and Hulu. Like I watch all of it, and it all inspires me to think through different shots, different shot placements, different ways to direct, that kind of thing. And I think part of this training is, obviously there's going to be different directors, there's going to be different operators, and part of this training this weekend is to try to kind of, we want every Sunday to look as close as possible, even though that there are different directors out there and there's different camera ops out there. But if we can all start getting on the same page towards the end goal, now the broadcast can look very similar. And even though directors can have their own style, even when I was at Bethel, we'd have 4 to 5 different directors that would rotate and throughout different weekends. And so there was definitely a different style. They would call things differently. But the main movements, the main direction was all very similar, to where as a viewer, you're not logging in the live stream and being like, wow, today looks so different. It's like, it is very, very similar, and there's just slight little things that could be different from week to week. And if you guys run a handheld camera, and to your point, if you have been using the Easy Rig and you want to try not using the Easy Rig, like I would recommend like trying different things. I personally, I don't use an Easy Rig. I know a lot of the guys that I work with don't, and part of that is they just want more of the freedom of movement and to be less conspicuous with it. But sometimes this can get heavy. A 7200 is even heavier, and so the Easy Rig is a nice like way to take some of the weight off your arms. I would just recommend trying it with and without, and just seeing like what is more comfortable for you. The one time that I would use an Easy Rig is like if I was running a 7200 or something in the crowd and I knew I wanted the camera to be up high, like this all the time, that's where I might actually use the easy rig, because it can hold it up this high for me. And now my arms are not getting tired holding it up here. But if I'm going to be on stage, I'm probably going to want to keep it as slim and small as possible. So there's loads of different ways to do it, and things that you can do differently to like help it feel comfortable. So I'd just recommend just kind of playing with what you feel like is best in your arms. I also brought a couple different lenses that you guys are more than welcome to play with as well, today, tomorrow. So this is the Sigma 18-35 f1.8, which I use on stage all the time, because I personally like it when it's wider and you're closer to the subject. I know that's not always possible, but and then this is like the matched pair. You could say this is the 50-100. So you guys have the 24-70, 70-200. This would be like my version of that, where this is 18-35 and 50-100. But the thing with these lenses is, and part of this style is, they are f1.8 and not 2.8, and so you get even more depth of field. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, that means that the subject in the front is going to be very sharp, and then the subject in the back is going to be even more out of focus. So then our depth of field, and the other thing is, these Sigma lenses are like almost macro. Like you can get very close to the subject and be in focus. But as you can see here, the cup is in focus, and it is very blurry or out of focus behind. So we're adding a lot of depth of field, which can help with the style. So if you're shooting guitar, it's even more, our focus plane is way more shallow right here. For both the stage cameras on that shoot, what I did was, they each had an 18-35, and then one had a 70-200 side stage, and one had the 50-100 side stage. And so for different parts of the sets or throughout the night, they would actually like quickly swap lenses. So when it was during like Carrie's set, when there's a lot of stuff happening on the stage, we had, they were all both on the 18-35s, getting wider and closer up to subjects. And then as the night progressed, it went into like an acoustic set with another artist. And so we're not, again, there's just two people on the acoustic set that are down front, and we're not going to want to get super close to them and be distracted, that kind of thing. So then they ended up hanging off to the side with longer lenses, and we're able to shoot different details and stuff at a longer lens. And even I was running the camera for the Brendan and Phil's tour, and the same thing, where like I was running an 11-20, so super wide lens, and would be on stage with all the band members, and then they would go into a couple of chill moments, and I'd put that 50-100 on and just walk into the crowd. It'd get different crowd details or acoustic moment details or anything like that, because during those songs, the band was not playing at all. So there was no point for me to just stay up there with the band, and I want to offer the director more shots, so I'm going to walk out into the crowd and get something else. Obviously, we have our grid, which if all the I'm hoping all the cameras have the grid on their monitor. Okay. I highly recommend keeping the grid on. I even and I've been doing this forever, and I shoot with the grid on. It just helps me know where things are, and you can line up your shots even better. So the grid is broken up into thirds. When we're shooting, the main follow cam, most of the time I'm going to say you're going to want to live in that. If you guys can see here, like the subject is in my center third. There are times like if they're playing an acoustic or something like that, you can like live them off to 1/3. And if I was going to live this subject off to 1/3, I'd put them on the line. I don't know if you can see that on the monitor, but the subject is physically on my third line here, which allows for the acoustic to be in there. If we're shooting, okay, let's shoot at this angle here. If I was going to be right here, I'm not saying don't go in front of in the stage, but if I'm shooting right here and this subject is my main subject, I'm probably not going to be putting them right in the center. I'm going to give them a little bit of looking room. And so that would be, looking room is them up in front here, which there could be another band member off to that side, which you can capture in there. But I'm not going to be wanting to put them all the way here to where I'm cutting off maybe part of their subject. That's where that third line comes in handy. Looking room comes in really handy when you're, I don't know, does your speaker walk a lot? Yes. Okay, great, perfect. So your looking room is really, really important for when they're walking. So instead of trying to keep them dead center while they're walking, is give them that looking room to where they're walking into your frame. That's good for 1 and 2. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I would leave them on that third frame, give them this looking room so that way they're like walking into your frame. And as you can tell, usually you can tell when they're trying to stop, they kind of just will naturally like.
You can't tell.
Okay, cool.
He fakes us out. He's like, whoa, go back.
Nice.
Can you talk to him tomorrow?
Yeah. Hey, man. And at the same time, I would recommend, like, okay, if he's a crazy walker like that, and you're not, I don't know, like, what your policy is, but I would recommend don't try to follow every movement. Like, if he's just going to do this, like, don't follow that movement into his, like, leans and stuff. Let him lean through the frame, and as he starts walking, give him that looking room to where he's just, like, walking into the frame. It means that if he's going to go this way, and then he turns around and goes this way, you're going to have to quickly pan it a little bit to where you're giving him the looking room this way. But I would definitely give him that lead room and not try to keep him dead center if he's walking all the time. Typically, I try to have like a tighter shot on one camera and like a head to toe on the other camera. And then if they're moving a lot, I tend to, as a director, stay on the wider one. And then when they like settle down, cut to the tighter one, that kind of thing, which could be hard. And I try to cut like where they're looking as well. So if he's walking this way and I'm on one, I would wait until he turns this way. He's naturally going to be looking at 2 and cut to 2. So that way there's a little bit of that cadence in the cut and you're kind of cutting around where he's looking. You could always, you could always set one of the handhelds up as a lock off somewhere else as well. If you ever wanted to, you could do a reverse. Or for this example here, if they have a guitar, this is kind of what I was talking about. If we keep them in our center third right here, it could feel slightly awkward, especially if their guitar is hanging out this way towards the edge of the frame here. And that's where I'd give them a little bit more of that looking room and kind of keep them on that third. So now we're framing in their entire, their body and their instrument, that kind of thing. This is about that's as tight as it's going to get. So it's not as huge of a deal, but I definitely like leaning towards the thirds. Adding a tiny bit of that movement into it. I'm not gonna recommend doing this figure 8 type of thing. I think it looks a little too crazy, but you can easily get keys. You could easily get any of the vocals, drums. If there's a guitar in front, pull focus to the guitar, and then get these wider shots as well. So that way you're able to offer as much variety with this camera as possible. So getting a wider shot, finding anyone that's worshiping. Usually I would attempt to get like their hands or something like that rather than this. Yeah. I think that any of those types of things, again, you can make an easy movement from someone with their hands and then a pan up and focus up to the vocal. Yeah, you can go from this wide, getting people. You can get a tight of a hand if you feel comfortable with that, and then just pull focus and pan up to the subject there. So all of those things are going to be creating movement, and again, it's intentional movement between two subjects that is going to make this feel more normal. I move this camera around all the time. Like, it will be, sometimes it'll be here, sometimes I'll have it here. I might even throw it up here and look at my monitor. Like, I'm changing the physical position of it depending on like what I'm shooting. I'm constantly changing around like where I'm holding the camera. Sometimes I want that higher vantage point, and so I will just rest the battery on my shoulder, look at the screen. And then sometimes I want the super low, up shot on a guitar or something, and I'll come down here and get that kind of shot. Another option, if you are having to move, is you can, instead of holding the side handle, is you could hold the top handle like this and do that kind of movement. As the stage camera operator, like I said in the very beginning, my goal would be to where I have a different shot every single time. And if my shot linking is as usable as, going from here to bass to drums, and I can stay live that whole time, that's even better. And that's where a lot of the movement that you see in these examples comes in. I would try to avoid it, so more of like this, and that's where I would probably lean on using my focus and a little bit of movement and getting this kind of key shot. Anytime in this shot here, there's going to be a subject standing here, but there is that light right there too. So anytime that you can find a light and keep it in the frame as well, I personally think that looks a lot better instead of just the blackness. And so finding those lights, even what you were mentioning, this type of shot can look really cool with now these lights out here coming into the lens here. And then you'll just have, even if you're just getting a little bit of the fingers in focus, that's a nice, yeah, I would clearly avoid this shot. You know what I mean? If that's my shot and I'm trying to get this person, but their butt is there, that's not a great shot. But I mean, if you're getting a frame like this,
You can see all the lights, it's up higher. Right.
you're getting down low, you're getting different things in your frame. So now we have, this person in frame here, you have the lights up here, you have the people down here. That is a better example of a reverse. We've even talked about yesterday adding lights directly lighting from the side. So that way now you're having light in the lens, you can get a little bit of flare, you can get them. Any light that's pointed at the camera and lighting the subject from the side will help create shadows, which creates more depth on camera. If you have, so now you have a little bit of flare with the subject, and now that shot goes from, just a black wall and a person to, oh, there's something else in the frame now, which can look really cool as well. So
I generally give directors about 10 seconds to either take my shot or I move on, because
Yeah, sometimes I'm sitting there for
ever
a while
wanna-
with a dope shot.
Yeah.
I don't like getting to a point where I feel like I just became static.
uh-huh.
All right, I want you to have a shot at Matt, so I'm going to stay here. If I do a 10 count and you haven't gone to me, I'm
Moving on.
because clearly you don't see the need for it yet, and I don't want to fall static.
So I have an interesting response to that. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. So typically what I'll teach the camera guys is get a shot and stay on it. Because if I linger on camera one, if it's the slow part of the song, I want 2, 3, and 4 to just be ready. Just stay, get your shot. Okay, I'll come to you eventually. How I think we're going to clarify that, if we see something as a director that we don't like, and we'll let you know. We'll say hey Jeremy, if you're camera 3, we'll say, hey camera 3, move on.
Get another
Move on,
shot.
get another shot. If we don't say that, typically that means okay, that's fine. I'll come to you eventually. Maybe it's just a slow part of the song or something.
And two little notes from both the op and the director standpoint. One would be from the director, is if you're on drums and they're not really doing anything yet, but on this next verse they're going to come in or whatever, I'd be 6, or I'll come to 6 on the chorus or something like that. So that way it's
Give them a heads up.
hey, I am gonna take your shot, but just hold there.